Have you ever secretly believed that burnout was just part of entrepreneurship? That if you wanted a successful business, you had to sacrifice your peace, your time, your health, and sometimes even your relationships to make it happen? Maybe you've convinced yourself that exhaustion is simply the price of success. But is it? Should it be? Because when I read scripture, I don't see a God who glorifies burnout. I see a God who values work, but I also see a God who values rest. Today, we're going to ask a really important question. Is burnout a requirement for running a successful business? And more importantly, what does God say about it? Are you a Christian entrepreneur feeling overwhelmed and burned out, struggling to find balance in your business and life? Well, you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Bridget, a wife, an entrepreneur of over 23 years, a mindset coach, and a woman who loves the Lord. I help you move from burnout to balance through simple daily systems that bring peace back into your business and your life. If you're ready for some simple strategies, real life resets, and a little encouragement to help you feel hope again, take a deep breath, close a few of those tabs in your brain, and let's dive in together. If this podcast has encouraged you, or this specific episode even, I would love for you to share it with an entrepreneur who really, really needs some encouragement today. Maybe she's feeling exhausted or overwhelmed or discouraged, and you just have her on your heart. Please share it. That is my number one goal for this platform, is to be able to share what I've been through so that other people can be blessed by it and hopefully learn from it. And if it's also blessed you, I would love for you to write a review. It really does mean so much to me, and I read every single one of them. So thank you so much in advance for that. This episode is deeply personal for me because for years, I really did believe that success required sacrifice. Not healthy sacrifice, the kind of sacrifice that leaves you exhausted and burnt out. The kind where you're always on for everyone all the time. The kind where you're constantly checking your phone, constantly working, constantly thinking about business, feeling like you should have done more, feeling like you can't take a break. That was a really big one for me. I felt like I could never take a break because somebody might need me. I remember one time my husband was taking a vacation and his boss said to him something very important. He was worried that he was going to have his phone. We were going to be gone internationally, and he was worried that he wouldn't be able to get calls or, texts from work. They might need him. And his boss said something very important. He said, "You're not that important. It's okay." And he didn't mean that in a bad way. He just meant the world will survive without you for a week. Go and enjoy your vacation. But I think that we're so wired as entrepreneurs to think that we have to be on all the time. And to be honest, I feel like so many of us feel like burnout kind of is a badge of honor. Like we celebrate being busy. We feel guilty when we're not working. We feel guilty when we rest. And I think somewhere along the way, many of us started believing that exhaustion was proof that we were doing enough. But I'm here to say, I'm here and living proof that it has ruined my life living that way. It has caused so many chronic challenges for me, emotionally, physically, so many ways. It caused burnout for a business that I love and I still love today. But man, it takes a toll. And I started asking myself questions like, what if burnout isn't proof that you're doing enough? What if it's proof that something is simply out of alignment? Because I thought this is not sustainable. And when you're young, and I started my business in my 20s, when I was in my 20s, and you have all the energy. I was an Energizer bunny, and I was going. But as time went on, it's like my body just couldn't keep up. And it was trying so hard, and it did. But finally, it told me enough was enough. And, I've said this before in prior episodes, but if you don't stop, your body will stop you. And that's exactly what happened for me. So I want to share with you some things that I have noticed biblically that the Lord talks about when he talks about rest. And I think this is really important for us to remember that the God of creation modeled rest for us. And I think that's such a beautiful thing for us to cling to. One of the things that amazes me, and when God created the world, that he could have chosen any pattern he wanted, yet after he created the heavens and the earth, he rested. He rested. Because rest is part of his design. Genesis 2:2-3. God established a rhythm of work and rest from the very beginning. The very first model of productivity God gave us included rest. And if rest was part of creation, maybe it should be part of our lives too. I think somewhere along the way, we started believing that if we weren't exhausted, we weren't doing enough. And I'm just being honest, that was me. I like to kind of take Fridays as my kind of day to like regroup, refresh. I had 4 power days. What does Friday look like? And I like to create that rhythm. And I'll be honest, I even love to have Fridays as kind of like spending that time with the Lord to just recenter myself and work on my healing journey. And I don't know about you, but man, that disconnection from the chaos of the world is so hard when you have just trained yourself, and the world has trained us to be on all the time. We get these dopamine hits by our phones constantly, when we're checking them, and we're so inundated with, our brains are used to action, the next reel, the next ding. And so just that rest seems so foreign to us now. And this has been really, really hard for me to learn that rest isn't bad, that it's okay to rest, and that rest doesn't mean I'm lazy. Rest doesn't mean that I'm slacking. It just needs to be part of my rhythm. I need to remember that, but it's so, so hard. So when I look at Scripture, I don't see a God who rewards that. I see a God who values faithfulness, and he values us being intentional, honoring our work. But definitely rest is a piece of the puzzle. And I think, just like anything, we can't have selective faith. We don't need to be selective in what scriptures we choose to look at. He honored work, and he also honored rest. Jesus never sacrificed his peace to fulfill his purpose. There's many things that Jesus did in the Bible, of course, that we've seen. And Jesus had the most important assignment in history, yet he regularly withdrew from the crowds, spent time alone, prayed, rested, and stepped away from it all. And here's what's fascinating. There were still people who needed him. There were still crowds waiting. There were still problems to be solved. Yet he allowed himself to step away. He allowed himself to override that need to do it all. He was still flesh, and we are too. And so I think we can look at his beautiful example of there was more demand on Jesus than any person ever in history, yet he even rested. Mark 6:31 says, "Come to me to a quiet place and get some rest." And so that is what we need to do, my friends. Jesus didn't just rest. He instructed others to rest too. And if Jesus needed margin, why do we believe that we don't? Why do we believe that? Sometimes I think we're afraid that if we're not constantly working, that people will think that we're lazy, or maybe we're afraid our team will think we're not working, or maybe we're afraid our customers will think we're not committed, or maybe we're afraid that God will think that we're not doing enough. But God never asked us to prove our worth through exhaustion. That's not what he did. And often this is also bred in that people pleasing that we've talked about before too. And so God fulfilled his purpose perfectly without sacrificing his peace. And that tells us something very important, that burnout is not required to fulfill God's calling on our lives. So I think this is the hardest truth of all. And this is the one that really, really, really has stuck with me, is that many entrepreneurs say that they want freedom, but their business really is bondage. It's interesting. I see entrepreneurs say, "Oh, I'm leaving my 8 to 5 for the freedom, for the flexibility. I'm so excited." And they've never worked harder in their life. And they have less freedom. They have less flexibility. They're more exhausted. They're more overwhelmed. They're more burnout. They have less time for their family. So who are we fooling? Who are we fooling? Entrepreneurship was supposed to create freedom and not slavery. So yet so many women are working around the clock, checking their phones constantly, feeling guilty when they rest, carrying these businesses around every hour. And honestly, we have to ask ourselves, why would anyone want what we're building if we're exhausted all the time? Why would anyone want a life like we have, if we're constantly overwhelmed, stressed out, and burned out, that is not freedom at all. That is not balance. And honestly, it is not attractive. I think people are attractive to alignment. People want their priorities in balance. People want that. But unfortunately, I can speak for myself. I was not modeling that well. People are attracted to seeing someone have a successful business with healthy rhythms and healthy boundaries and healthy relationships and peace. So, success and peace can coexist. I believe that. And in fact, I believe that's part of God's design. I don't want to build a business that people admire, but a life that they would never want. I want to build a life that honors God, a life that my family can enjoy, a life that has, balance and flow and peace. And honestly, I feel like that when I rest, I get up more excited to work. Do you feel that way? Like I notice that whenever I allow myself time to rest, I'm actually energized. And interesting enough, I had a therapist many years ago. I was just so exhausted and worn out and stressed out. And I came to the session, it was on a Friday. I came to the session and she said, "What would you like to talk about today?" And honestly, I didn't say a word. I just cried. I literally cried. I bet I cried for a good 5-10 minutes. I didn't say a word. I just wanted to be seen in that moment. And so I cried. And she just let me cry. She didn't say one word. She held space for me in that moment. And whenever I got done crying and I pulled myself together, she said, "How did that feel?" And I said, "It felt great." And she said, "Well, tell me what's going on." And I just explained to her, that I had been struggling with just overwhelm and burnout and exhaustion and fatigue and all these things. And she said, "I'm going to give you one piece of homework." She said, "You're going to start today at 5 o'clock. It was on a Friday, as I mentioned. And you're going to turn your phone off, on silent, whatever you have to do. And you are not going to pick it back up until Monday morning at 8 o'clock. You cannot continue this way, and you are going to burn out to the point where you're not going to even love what you do anymore, and you're not going to have joy doing it." And that's so true. So I did what she said. It was the hardest thing. I don't think I had ever taken that long of a break from my phone. And I did. And I took that whole weekend off from my phone. And it was so hard. It's like a magnet. I kept wanting to pick it up. But I didn't. And when I came back in the office on Monday morning, I was so excited and ready to go because I was rested. And so I have actually found that I have more joy in what I do when I have allowed myself that rest. It's just like you're re-energized. But when we're always on all the time, we never get to feel that way. So I just don't believe that burnout is required to build a successful business. And so I think that for all of us, sometimes we're afraid to slow down because we're worried about what people might think. Maybe we'll think these thoughts, as I mentioned, that we're not working hard enough or that we're lazy. But who told us that? Again, it's the stories we tell ourselves, because those thoughts often come from fear, performance, comparison, or people pleasing, but not from God. God never asked us to prove our worth through productivity. He asked us to be faithful, to be a good steward of what He's given us. And I think that's a huge difference. So I think we can always remember that as long as we're being a good steward of what God's given us, we're being faithful to the call He's given us on our life, and we're being obedient to His word, then we're going to have a beautiful business. He is going to fill in the gaps, my friends. When you rest and you give Him time and He sees you honoring your body and your family and Him, He's going to multiply what you do. So just remember that. He is going to multiply your efforts because He is good that way. And He knows what you need. And He's proud of us whenever we honor ourselves and put ourselves before our businesses and honor our bodies, honor Him, honor everyone in our life. So I love that. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I love Psalm 23. He leads me beside the still waters. That's just one of the verses in Psalm 23 that I love. Just peace. Just peace. I hope today that you'll just take this moment to just take a big deep breath. Just a big deep breath and let it out. and just feel his peace. He wants you to feel that. That is his design, and we want to honor that. So as I wrap up, I just want to remind you, my friend, I don't believe God called you, to build a business that was required to sacrifice everything in your life, your peace, your family, your health. I believe he's just called us to be faithful. And while entrepreneurship absolutely requires hard work, don't get me wrong, I'm a hard worker. I just don't believe that burnout is proof that we're doing it right. In fact, sometimes burnout is simply a signal that something is out of alignment that needs to be corrected. So my prayer isn't that people admire my business at all. My prayer is that they admire the peace and the balance and the alignment that comes from building it God's way. Because I don't believe that God called us to sacrifice our peace to sustain our success. I just don't. I believe he called us to be faithful. And that's, I think, where the joy is, honestly. So today, my friends, I just want to encourage you. I always want to encourage you that you can start anew, that every day is a new day, that God's mercies are new every day. And my favorite scripture, Isaiah 43:19, is that he is doing a new thing. So for some of us, it's just a new thought that maybe, man, I can work differently. Maybe that is possible. Maybe I don't have to work sun up to sundown to make it happen. Maybe I can have healthy boundaries in my business that align with my life, with my values. You're going to be more inspirational to people that want to be entrepreneurs and maybe be in your field because of how you live. They're watching. I tell the women I mentor all the time that people are like Santa Claus. They're always watching. And it's true. It's what people see. It's not what you do. And people admire the way that you work. And they're craving. Women are craving balance in their life. A life where they really can have it all. And I believe if we can build some rhythms, one of them being rest, one of them being healthy schedules, and having grace for ourselves in all of it, we are going to attract so many more women that have a dream to be an entrepreneur too. So thank you so much for being here today. I really do hope this blessed you, and I hope that you will share this with someone that you think might be blessed by this. I am so grateful to have this opportunity to share with you today. Thank you for clicking on my podcast and listening, and I hope you have a blessed day, and I'll see you next week. Hey friend, I hope this gave you a little more clarity and a whole lot of hope today. And if it did, would you share it with another Christian entrepreneur who's juggling all the things too? And if you haven't already, leave a quick review. It helps more women find this space. And remember, you don't need a full restart. Maybe you just need a simple reset. Small steps done consistently really do create change. And there is so much hope in that. So take a deep breath. Today is a new day, and you've got this. And I can't wait to see you next week.